Greetings, it is I, or Carisper, welcoming you to another not quite episode of the Sanguine Archives. However, this one is a bit more fitting than the last one, because today we are speaking about the World of Darkness in general. Now, before I start properly, I wanted to say that I will do videos in character soon, or at least try and hopefully not fail too badly when doing it. This video, however, is shot in daylight, quite untypical because I'm completely out of character right now. The light, if it's in character, is supposed to be a very bright lamp, just like that, because vampires usually don't really do well with the sun. Anyway, World of Darkness. Sorry for the rambling. Again, this is a non-scripted video, so I'm just doing it freestyle and see how that works out as a test. I actually have a lot of helpful people who watch my videos and give me tips on how to improve, and one thing was that they said maybe try not to read off a sheet. Yeah, I guess that's a good idea. I'll just try, and in these videos I can't really forget something, so I hope it works out. So, what's so good about the World of Darkness? Well, World of Darkness is one of many franchises for role-playing games, and it's one of my favorites. I can't decide between World of Darkness and Realms of Arcania, or Das Schwarze Auge in Germany, because both are extremely great franchises, extremely well done, and I love both of them for different reasons. There is also the one that is the most popular around the world, which is Dungeons and Dragons. You definitely have heard of that, I guess. There is Pathfinder, which is kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but with some very important changes to it and a new world. There is Shadowrun, Splittermond, I don't even know if there's an English version for that one. There is Warhammer 30k. There is a role-playing game for Age of Conan, and I mean a pen and paper version. There are games that are more obscure, like a role-playing game for World of Warcraft, and I don't mean the MMO, but an actual pen and paper for World of Warcraft. There is one for The Witcher. There is a lot of different role-playing games out there. And you can play whatever you like, immerse yourself in that world. But today we are focusing on World of Darkness and why it is one of my two big favorites. The best thing about the World of Darkness is that it saves you a lot of trouble, time, and effort if you try to start playing it, because most franchises play in a fantasy world, a world that was created by the authors that is completely different from our own world, with different laws of nature, with different cultures, different stories, different ways how things are done, a lot of different people, often different species, and just an entirely different history. And you have to know a lot about the world before you can actually really portray a character and really play in it. Like in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, if you play a Paladin of Helm, you should first of all know what are paladins in that world, what can they do in that world, how are they different from warriors or priests, who the hell is Helm? I mean, that sounds quite weird, doesn't it? What culture are you playing in? How are paladins treated, and so on and so forth. There's a lot you have to go into in order to properly play a paladin. In World of Darkness, one of the best things is that the setting is set in our real world. So the characters that you meet can be people that actually exist for real. You can meet, say, Bill Gates in the World of Darkness. That can happen. You can meet Robert De Niro. You can meet Leonardo DiCaprio. You can meet Obama. Whoever. They are existing in the World of Darkness because the World of Darkness is de facto our real world. Similarly, if you play, say, Dark Ages, the medieval setting, you can meet up with historical characters that actually existed, and there is a lot of characters like Friedrich Barbarossa, I hope that's also the correct name in English, or King Arthur the Lionheart, and so on and so forth. A lot of interesting people from history that you can actually meet inside the game because they exist in that game world. Similarly, the history that happened is pretty much identical to the history that happened in our world, with some interesting tweaks to make it more interesting. And that means that you don't really have to put in much effort to learn about the setting, because you should be familiar with it already by just living in this world. You will automatically know what cultures there are if you play, say, um, an US American, I don't know, werewolf. You shouldn't have much problem portraying an US American because you kind of know what they're supposed to be like. I mean, you don't have to fall for all the stereotypes, but you get the general idea. You have a good understanding of what US Americans are and how they are, say, different from British people. That doesn't mean that every character that plays as US American has to be similar, because there is a lot of variations. But a general understanding of what the culture is like should be there. That doesn't mean that you have to portray every single stereotype. Now, with that out of the way, the other cool thing about World of Darkness is that, of course, you can learn about our real world while playing. Because, here's the catch, a lot of things that happen in World of Darkness, say in the history of the Dark Ages, is also pretty accurately portraying what actually happened in real history of our world. Now it's not perfect, there's always some things that are a bit meh. Sometimes they have people living together in the same time that were a bit more apart, but the research did much better than, say, Hollywood does for their movies. So it's pretty much a documentary that's educational. The same goes for the mythological elements, because in World of Darkness it's of course not just playing a normal guy in our normal world, because that would kinda be boring. However, there's Second Life, but whatever. The important thing is that in World of Darkness various mythological elements are actually real. Vampires exist, werewolves do exist, mages do exist, and so on and so forth. Those are all real creatures in that world. More importantly, there's always a reason why most people are completely unaware that they exist. As example, the vampires use the masquerade, which means that they try to pass off as normal mortals. Because if the humans found out that vampires are actually a real thing, they would band together and just kill them all, and the vampires are very well aware of that, which is why they try to hide their powers. The mages, as example, have this thing called paradox, which means if you try to cast a spell, it cannot violate the laws of nature too much, because if it does, it will just fail. So the magic that is actually done in World of Darkness is rather low tier. It's more about manipulating outcome rather than summoning fireballs or something. As example, you can use magic to just make the weapon of an enemy jam, or to guide the bullet that you are firing right where you want it to be. Which doesn't look magical, but it's clearly a big advantage if you can, say, just jam the weapon of your enemy. That helps, for sure. You can heal wounds or help the healing, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things you can actually do with the magic in subtle ways that doesn't cause paradox. Now, in Mage you can try to throw a fireball, but it's very, very difficult, and the chances that paradox occur are very, very high, and then it might just explode in your face. There's also some more or less intelligent ways going about it, but that would be for a Mage video. In the World of Darkness there is a lot of different franchises. As I already said, there's Vampire and Werewolf. Werewolf, you don't have to play a werewolf, there's also other shape changes called Fera, like Were-Bears, Were-Lions, and so on and so forth. Mage, which is extremely well researched, like the authors actually joined the Golden Dawn to research on the Hermetic Order. They did join with a Telema group to investigate the Aleister Crowley stuff. Then they have the Akashic Brotherhood, which is more a Tibetan Chinese style of magic, and so on and so forth. There's pretty much everything that you have seen in horror movies, or maybe also fantasy movies, is represented there in terms of magic in all kinds of different ways. There's also the Celestial Chorus, who are kind of more religious, Christian-like mages that are more casting divinations and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things there, and every school of magic has its own specialty, and so on and so forth. Then there is also Demon, which is a franchise centered about demons, and where you basically interact with the world as a demon and try to gain power and influence, and so on and so forth. There's Wraith, or kind of where you play ghosts that can't find rest in the unlife, and so on and so forth. There is Mummy, where you are playing a mummy that is actually one of the few truly immortal creatures in the world of darkness, and you can play kind of Dark Souls style games as a mummy, because if they die, they just come back. They need a little bit of time to reform, but you can't really kill a mummy. Then there is also Hunter, which is a franchise in which you play a rather normal-ish human who hunts the spawns of darkness. And then there is, well, not necessarily darkness, let's just say supernaturals, because werewolves aren't necessarily dark or evil, but they're still supernatural. Same goes for mages, by the way. Then there's offshoots like Ghoul, where you play a ghoul, which is a servant of a vampire. The ghoul is fed vampire blood, thus gets an extended lifespan and some superhuman powers, but not too crazy, and they're also subservient to the vampire. There's Sorcerer, where you play I'd say wannabe mage, because real magic, true magic in the world of darkness is something you have to awaken to, and that is pretty much not limited by anything but your own capability. Sorcery, on the other hand, also called hedge magic, follows straight rules and spells, and if you don't know the spell or the ritual, you can't do it. However, the good thing about it is that everyone who knows the spell and the ritual and performs them correctly can make the magic happen, even if they don't have the awakened avatar that you would need for real magic. Then there is of course also the Exalted, which is a kind of prehistory style game where you play demigods like say Hercules and stuff. And I might have missed one or two, I'm not completely sure. I have Prothean, the Created, where you play as a created artificial creature or being, like say a golem. That happens. And of course you can also just try to play as a normal human character in this world and interact with the supernaturals that you run into. There's also the Fae, which are the little folk, not necessarily good though. And yeah, I think that's about it, I hope at least. And all of them have explanations why normal mankind, most of humanity, are completely oblivious to their existence. Say if a werewolf transforms into his combat form or any form that is obviously a werewolf, they cause what's called delirium, which is kind of a dementia type thing caused in humans that see it, which means that upon seeing the werewolf you'll actually just have a blackout and forget what happened, basically. Not to mention you're not too likely to survive attack by a werewolf in a were form. Anyway, they research the topics really well and really take the cultural heritage of pretty much any culture around the globe, all of their myths, and try to fit them into the world of darkness, and they do a pretty amazing job with it, trying to solve contradictions, because you know one religion has a completely different mythos of how creation went than another, and they kind of try to fit it all together into one coherent, cohesive story. There is not only European style centered stuff, but there's also Asian centered, mostly China, Japan, Korea. There is stuff focused on Native Americans, there's stuff focused on Africa, so there's really pretty much everything around the globe. All the myths and mythology are represented in the world of darkness, which is very cool because you can learn a lot about real world mythology by playing World of Darkness and getting immersed into that. Now keep in mind that World of Darkness isn't a one-to-one representation of those mythologies, but a lot influences them. Say there's a Nosferatu called Baba Yaga, which is a Russian witch that you might be familiar of from Tales, and the Baba Yaga in the game is pretty close to what Baba Yaga is in the mythos, but it's not identical. There is some important changes because they had to make something fit to make her into a vampire. Speaking of vampires, there is of course different clans, and every clan has a different mythological vampire story as background. They have different disciplines of what they can do, and it's fantastic, but I don't want to go too much into detail here. I might do a character creation video sometime in the future. The other thing that I really like about World of Darkness, and to a degree Realms of Arcania, is that they are very mature worlds. As in, you shouldn't play that with children. I mean, Realms of Arcania can be perfectly played with children, and If you play mage in World of Darkness, you can make a setting happen where children could join in. You could play a Harry Potter style role-playing game in Mage the Ascension with the Order of Hermes and their out of world in the Umbra thing called Horizon, which is kind of a university for mages outside our real world. So you can kind of make that happen. However, most of World of Darkness is, well, dark, and it's a role-playing game that is centered about very mature themes. If you play werewolf, first of all, there will be a lot of gore and it's very brutal and it's kind of sad too. Also, bestiality is normal because that's how werewolves procreate. Your mom might be a human, your dad might be a wolf, and there you go, you know, that's how werewolves work. If you play a demon, I mean, what are you expecting? Of course they are perverted and try to do the most evil and cruel things, and corrupt people and so on and so forth. I mean, duh. Similar for Wraith. Of course you have a depressing, tragic backstory, and depression and tragic stuff is kind of the bare bone stuff of Wraith. Of course, Mummy, you play someone who was cursed by an absolutely horrific ritual way back when in ancient Egypt. So there's a lot of things to go there too. And Vampire is depending a lot on the clans that you play with. If you say just play the standard Camarilla ones, you will still get into nightclubs, and Toreador are stereotypical working as strippers and stuff like that, so there is also that part of adult life. But it's not as bad as if you say play a Giovanni, where necrophilia and incest are completely normal and nobody gives a second thought about it. With all vampires, there is of course the theme of rape, because you're taking blood from an unwilling person that you violate quite often when you are hunting. So it's still quite a mature theme, and it gets completely out of hand when you play Ghoul, because Ghoul is centered a lot on sexuality, because the vampire feeds blood to the ghoul. That blood gives the ghoul the superhuman powers, but it also makes the ghoul absolutely obedient to their vampiric master, and the rulebook has a lot of BDSM artwork in it, and that's basically what Ghoul boils down to. Now, how much you implement those factors in your game is of course completely up to you. You don't have to play adult themes in Vampire. You don't have to really go into detail on what the Giovanni are doing or how Nagaraja eat people. You don't really have to really go into... You don't have to play the Toreador stripper, you know. They exist in the world though, and you may encounter them. You could encounter them and it wouldn't be off-putting, which is something that very, very few franchises do. As a comparison, in Dungeons and Dragons, I am completely oblivious to the mating rituals of wood elves, because why? I mean, you know, it's not really important for anything. In World of Darkness, you will be aware that there is a clan that is into incest and necrophilia, because that's just a thing there and that exists. It doesn't mean you have to interact with it, but it's there. So World of Darkness really goes into those mature adult themes, which makes it quite fantastic and unique in my opinion. Now, Realms of Arcania has those elements in it too, but on an entirely different level. In Realms of Arcania you have Belkelel, which is the archdemoness of the Black Lust, and her divine counterpart Raya, which is the goddess of love and the good stuff, let's say. And there are festivals that are inspired by the Brazilian festivals, where you have completely or at least half nude people running in the streets, sometimes doing it in the streets. The altars of Raya, the holy place of her, there's a lot of sex going on, because that's one way to worship the goddess. Meanwhile, Belkelel is all about perverted stuff, let's say necrophilia, bestiality, stuff like that. There's also Leftan, who is a son of Raya, who is the god of rape and stuff like that. So it's in the world, but you can easily leave it out without really subtracting from the atmosphere. It will still work out fine. Meanwhile, in World of Darkness, if you leave those things out completely, you might run into some troubles, as some things are just way less horrific and the dark atmosphere that is supposed to be created by it kind of gets lost. It also sometimes makes it difficult to justify why you're fighting a certain group, because if they aren't bad, As example, the big conflict is usually between Sabbath and Camarilla, because the Camarilla in Vampires thinks that mankind can be abused and stuff like that, but keep it on a humane level so that nobody gets that you're a vampire. The Sabbath is more, we are beasts, we know that we are monsters, and we embrace the fact that we are evil. So they do things to humans that the Camarilla won't, at least openly. Not saying the Camarilla are the good guys in any way, they're just less monstrous. So, is there more I want to say about the World of Darkness right now? I think we are at a good point with 20 minutes and just try to wrap it up and go to the next episode. So, as a quick summary, what I like about World of Darkness is 1, it's set in our real world. 2, you can learn a lot about our real world by playing it. 3, it is a world that allows for adult themes and actually makes them rather prominent in the setting, at least when you're fighting bad guys. With that, I guess we are done, and I'll just say thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, ring the notification bell, and most importantly, share and tell your friends about it. I will be doing more general role-playing stuff on here as well. At least I plan to, we'll see how it goes. And thank you for all of you who helped me get my background right, the lighting. I will definitely improve on some other things that you guys told me. And yeah, thank you. Also to those guys who argue and discuss with me and kinda make sure that I'm fact checked and can present to you the best and correct information. With that, I want to actually wrap up with one more thing, and that is, have a good day. Thank you for watching.